Welcome to the Tech Simple podcast. Independent insights into the latest AV technologies, as well as tips and best practices to optimize AV solutions for modern workplace and learning environments. Here are your hosts, David and Jonathan from Konnectus AV Consulting.
Welcome to another Tech Simple podcast. As always, my good friend David is joining me here today. Welcome, David.
Oh, thanks, Jonathan. It is an absolute pleasure once again to be by your side. And we're going to be talking about an interesting topic today, one that sort of comes up in pretty much every project we work on, isn't it? It's all about AV technology and how that, along with smart design, can help us optimize the experiences for people with a disability in the workplace. I mean, I can think of countless times we've sort of worked on that together. Hearing assistance systems, vision impairment systems. It's not something that's kind of thought about too often, and that's the reason for this episode, to be honest with you. We want to sort of raise awareness of it, just help people understand the intricacies and the importance of some of these things and the new technologies that are out there. And with us to help us do that, of course, is our good friend Ling from Jands. Welcome, Chris.
G'day, guys. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Absolute pleasure to have you. You are obviously a person we've known for, what, decades, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's at least 10 years, I'd say.
At least, yeah. I mean, I would just classify you as a bit of an AV expert, especially audio. Enough said really from me. Why don't you tell a little bit about yourself for the listeners?
Well, it's absolutely an honour to be part of this conversation today. Yeah, I have come up through the ranks of the audiovisual industry, particularly in audio, being a sound engineer and now working here at Jands, being part of the team that kind of helps people understand what sort of products we represent and where their applications lie. That's been a really good part. And being able to educate people on different aspects of AV tech has been really good and fulfilling for me.
Yeah. Well, I know the interactions that we have with you, Chris, I mean, Jonathan, is probably a little bit more yourself than me, but you know, we've got so many projects where Chris steps in and lends a huge hand, doesn't he?
Oh, absolutely. I'm surprised he still answers my calls, to be honest.
Oh, look, we have nice, robust conversations, I'll say. It's always good. It's great to hear the things that are out there that you guys are designing and the challenges you meet and how we can be part of helping solve those challenges and solutions. But also there's things just for the general industry that I think is great that you guys bring to the table too. So thank you.
Well, Chris, let's dive into this topic today. You've got some real specific experience, actually. You were telling me prior to us hitting record here that quite often you go around and you give kind of like educational talks to groups of architects and interior designers, especially on hearing assistance. So we're going to dive into that first. You know, maybe compliance is a good place to start. Tell us a little bit about the compliance factor.
Yeah. It's a little bit like I tell my daughter when she has to do a homework, I say, yeah, do what you have to do, then you get to do what you want to do. So compliance is really that area where we have to meet a need to be compliant for a project and for completion and handover. And the compliance factor that really hits AV the most, particularly in workspace design and video conference spaces, is really around hearing assistance and hearing augmentation systems to allow a fair and equitable access to the conversation, to the technology for people with hearing impairments or disabilities. So, or people who are classified deaf through their hearing aids and implants as well. So that's really led me down the road of understanding these standards that we have to work to, understanding the codes of all the standards, but also what they mean in application. And one of the biggest conversations I have with architects, particularly when I've completed a presentation about what hearing assistance is and why we need it and what the compliances are. It's normally about what technology then is right for which space. And the first part of that conversation I have is usually similar to what you would have with a client, whereas you're really asking them, what is this space for? We need to know what the space is designed for before we really know what the right solution is going to be for that. Because there's so many options in that area for hearing assistance to meet a compliant system, but also an effective system for the use of the space.
That's a great point because it does have to match, specific needs. I mean, Jonathan, there's 4 different types. You want to just run through those quickly?
Yeah, so there really is 4 common types of hearing assistance, and the National Construction Code says you have to use them in specific spaces. But we have infrared systems, we have RF systems. Probably the one that most people are most familiar with is the hearing loop. And an emerging technology is Wi-Fi systems that you can receive on your phone as well.
All right, maybe we could just take a practical example for the audience of each one of those. Maybe you guys can take turns, and I'll just sort of moderate here as we go. Chris, we'll start with you. The infrared technology, what is it, and what's a good application for the listeners to know about?
So the infrared technology is where you have a transmitting panel or device mounted in the room somewhere, and the person using the system will have a receiver, and that is literally a channel pairing via an infrared signal from that panel to that receiver. That receiver could then plug into have a 3.5mm socket for people to plug in headphones so they can hear the sound or the speech more directly. It also might involve plugging that into what's called a localized neck loop. So it's a small piece of copper in like a necklace that is a miniature version of what you would get an induction loop system that might be laid into the floor. Okay. The way the neck loop works is that interacts with the telecoil or the small piece of copper in a hearing aid that might have a telecoil, which still the majority of them still do have, and that creates the audio signal that goes into their ear through the hearing aid. And then you could also have maybe just an infrared that could be a speaker or something as well. That far less common. Mostly it's either headphones or a neck loop that's involved in that receiver. Receiver will have to be charged, and then there are actually, in compliance, there's particular rules around how many receivers need to be supplied depending on the legal capacity of the space as well.
So a good application, is that maybe a larger type of an area, or it could be small as well? What do you think?
You're probably looking in the small areas. I think the most common area that you would see them, Jonathan, would be in K-12 schools.
Okay.
So that primary and secondary school market, where people have a number of students that might need to use those systems. So that's an easy way for those students, maybe even to have their own designated receiver, to go around and interact with the audio systems in each classroom and just changing the channel on that receiver as they go from class to class.
Okay.
Or a small corporate entity, any sort of corporate entity that might have a small, maybe up to 10, 12-person boardroom that's engaging with a video conference system. They may have a couple of receivers permanently in a charging dock at the front of the room, and then people who want to use that system and are comfortable with engaging with it can grab that as well.
Perfect. Let's look at radio frequency, or RF, Jonathan. What is it, and what's an application?
Yeah, so radio frequency is actually a very similar system to the IR. So there's a transmitter and there's a receiver, and with the receiver you have headphones or a neck loop. The key difference, though, between RF and IR is the line of sight requirement. So just like your TV remote at home, IR, if you block the top of your remote, it won't work. So with the IR hearing system, you need to be able to see that transmitter. With RF, you don't need to be able to see it. So this
goes through walls or whatever.
Exactly. Okay. Or you can be facing away, or you can be moving around. Sure. It's much more flexible. So great applications for RF. And you may have seen this when you're traveling overseas, are tour guides.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So tour guides or museums particularly use RF quite a lot because they've got physical environment that you can't always have line of sight.
Are they well suited to a workplace, for example?
For a workplace, not so much, because they're less secure. So it's much easier to eavesdrop into an RF system than IR system.
Yeah, so the privacy was obviously compromised.
Yeah.
All right. I think hearing loops is one that a lot of the audience are probably familiar with or have heard before, and probably think that's the only way, to be honest. So Chris, over to you. Hearing loops, in a nutshell, what is a hearing loop and what are some good applications?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, there is a thing called the telecoil, which sits in most hearing aids. People can buy hearing aids without it, but particularly in Australia, the government actually has a system where if you need hearing aids, the ones that they will issue under Medicare will most often have a telecoil. And that's probably one of the oldest pieces of AV tech that's actually around. It started way back with some of the first telephones. That's what transmitted and vibrated and caused the audio to come out of some of the early telephones as well. So that telecoil is interacted with a hearing induction loop that is like physical copper cable or flat tape that is laid in a floor in particular arrangement to be optimized for the space. And that emanates an electromagnetic field that transmits the audio and interacts with the telecoil behind the person's ear in their hearing aid, and then creates the audio signal for people to hear. One of the biggest applications for hearing induction loops is usually in places of public need or public access. So airports, train stations, bus terminals, large auditoriums, large school halls. There's a number of different benefits to induction loops, and there's a lot of caveats into making it work as well. All of these systems, no matter which system you use, do have to be checked to make sure they're working every 12 months as per compliance. But one of the unique things about the induction loop system is once it's in there and it's getting its audio signal, it's pretty much going all the time. So people can interact with it. As far as security is concerned, there are some concerns that if it's not designed properly, that there might be potential for someone else within a T-coil to walk past a room, like a boardroom maybe, hear a conversation they're not meant to have access to. But there's some ways to design around that, but it's definitely still used in that respect as well. But generally, when you've got larger groups of people, I think that's where you're going to find more induction loop systems.
Definitely where you don't want to have to manage receivers or hand them out.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yep. All right, the last one, a bit more of a modern, the last or most recent technology to be in this space, Jonathan, is Wi-Fi. So I think it's a pretty cool application, actually.
Yeah, it's quite a fascinating one, and it's great development, actually. And it's actually using the infrastructure that's already available. So just like your computer connects to Wi-Fi, rather than have to go get a receiver or rather than having to flick your hearing aid over to T-coil setting, you can actually use an app on your phone. And you open up that app and it gives you access to that venue's hearing assistance system, and you can switch between them. A really fascinating feature is actually being able to provide multiple different audio streams as well. So live translation is definitely one for people that don't speak the language. That's one great feature of the Wi-Fi type systems.
That's right. And I guess this could be used in so many different applications. The beauty is we've all got one of those smartphones now in our pockets, so downloading the app is pretty straightforward. And Wi-Fi coverage in most areas is also very good. I mean, especially in a workplace, which is what we're talking about today.
And much of that is leveraging off the fact that there's a lot of hearing aids now that Bluetooth connect to people's phones.
True. Yes, very true. Very true. Why don't we move on to, say, vision? So I've talked about hearing assistance. What about vision assistance? Maybe let's cover that. And I think there's probably a few things we can talk about here. Recent advancements in cameras and the technology behind them and in video conferencing software platforms, I guess have allowed the faces that we're seeing on a screen in a video call to be so much bigger. Isn't that right? Chris?
Yeah, you're no longer having to look at just a long table where heads become dots. Thing. And people who have certain levels of vision impairment may not be able to uniquely identify who the talker is and associate what they're hearing with the person on the screen. So the fact that there's different ways of laying out the speakers in there, and there's now technology where some cameras will automatically take those headshots and make them larger. I think the other part, which Jonathan, it can probably help me on, is that screens servicing these video output spaces are much bigger and more affordable too.
Absolutely. So not only can we now zoom into each person's face individually so you can see them, but the cost of screens has come down significantly. So where we used to put in quite a small screen, a 55-inch, just because of cost constraints, we can now even put in a 65 or 75-inch, which then again increases the size of those people's faces, also increases the size of the content people are presenting. So it's much easier to see for people with vision impairment.
Yeah, it's a great tool up our sleeve, isn't it, as designers, that we can be putting those things forward and just making a more equitable environment for everybody.
And pairing that with intelligent camera systems that will potentially, if it's a presentation area, they might track the speaker as they move around the space and give you a more detailed shot of that person as well. That's excellent technology that's helping people, not just...
And that's been getting better and better, by the way. By the month, almost, it seems. It's just amazing what keeps coming out quarter after quarter, announcement after announcement, firmware release after firmware release. It really is spectacular what's happening here. And that's just, I guess, a great way for us to really help the vision impaired get a much better experience. And just kind of staying on on the video side of things, I guess we can also get some auto-captions up on the screen there, which can help.
Yeah, that's right. So a lot of the video conferencing systems, and there's also auxiliary systems that can now convert what people are saying to live captions. So it's not something that's pre-done or pre-recorded. As you talk, those captions come up on the screen. And that's really driven by some of the latest technology in AI, being able to understand what people are saying across multiple different languages.
Yep, absolutely. Text-to-voice being an application with AI, being able to read over the text and actually give an audible read of that text to people who may not be able to see or define the text properly, absolutely helps them engage with content, engage with meetings and spaces a lot better as well. And then there's also other things to consider, possibly where, people on their phones, I've seen people with varying font size on their phones based on how well they can see. That can move over into how we design AV technology as well.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, if we look at control system user interface design, quite often there's a device which we use to turn a system on or off or adjust the volume or whatever it is that needs to be controlled. Hopefully not too much in a automated AV system. However, the button size, we want that to be nice and large and easy for everyone to see. And the font size, as you say there, Chris, nice and large. You don't want little small tiny buttons which people have to squint even, just to try and decipher what it is. There is still a lot of that going on in design, and we want to try and stamp that out and make it so much more user-friendly.
And I think that's a really key thing, actually. We talked a little bit about regulation at the start of this discussion, and really the regulation is only talking about hearing assistance. But there's so much more that technology in AV can be doing to make the workplace more accessible. And it's these types of design thinking that you need to incorporate into each step of the way as you're delivering a project. So like the touch panel design, okay, well, let's think about vision impaired people. We need to make those buttons big. We need to make them more accessible for everyone. We need to enable auto captions. The colors that we use on our touch panels need to be high contrast so it's easy to see. So these are all the types of things you should be thinking about throughout your design process, not just going for the bare minimum of what's regulated in the NCC.
Well, that's a very true point. I'm sure you'd agree with that, Chris, because the compliance where we talked about in the beginning, there is not that much at all. If we look at the broad spectrum, there's really just hearing assistance, isn't there?
Yeah, and once we got past that, it's a decision to engage and see, is this leading us to take things in a different way to make things better for the customer or for the people who are using the space? Or do you just clip a ticket and get out of there and think the people that want to add value to their projects do the for them?
Absolutely, and more importantly, to their people. And I think that's what businesses are focused on, giving the greatest experiences they can for all people. And that's really what we're talking about here today. I guess some of the more obvious ones is just the heights of those control devices. They should be at the right height, considering whether you're standing or maybe sitting in a wheelchair. I think that's sometimes overlooked and needs to be kept in mind as well.
Anything you have to interact with, if you take a moment to take the perspective of someone who might be coming in a wheelchair, either as a guest or as an employee, it'll make you consider things differently. Maybe the room could be a bit low.
That's a good one, room externals, yes.
Yeah.
Wayfinding, signage, absolutely.
The other one I see is the touch panels in the middle of the table, and if you're in a wheelchair, you can't actually reach to the center of the table, or the cable's not long enough to reach to you to plug in your laptop. So definitely considerations.
Yeah. Well, just to wrap up, maybe about the environment. I know, Chris, you have a few ideas and some experience in this space, especially with regards to lighting and sound masking. What can be done there to sort of improve experience?
Yeah, so these are the areas that not necessarily disabilities, but considerations for people with, and increasing in our world happens to be mental health concerns and being comfortable in the workspace. Definitely over the last 5 to 10 years, we've seen a changeover from fluorescent lights to LED-based lighting, which has probably made it a lot better for people who, with their eyesight, might get fatigued up under the flicker of the old fluorescent tubes and that sort of thing and feel like they're tired when they finish work. Now we have the ability to change the color temperature of the lighting. So the color temperature might be a bit more of a warmer, replicating an incandescent light that makes people feel a bit better, makes things easier to see, less contrast than just stark white light as well. And then other areas towards being able to concentrate on your work and understand mental health concerns around comfort and the audio side of things, sound masking has been very much on the increase, particularly in a lot of corporate spaces. You can acoustically treat a space really well, but nothing really treats the transmission of audio over the open air. Sound masking does that. And then you can get creative with those sort of ideas and maybe move into a bit of soundscaping where you create an audio environment for people.
So let's describe that in a little bit more detail for the listeners, because I think we all know what sound masking is, but perhaps a lot of the listeners won't understand exactly what that is, because it's not that widely, kind of out there in the market. It's been in the market for a while, but it's not taken up that much. Isn't it? Maybe it is on the rise, as you say. So what is sound masking exactly?
So sound masking is the ability to introduce a low-level noise that is engineered to help mask intelligible speech over open-air distances.
Okay.
So, for example, if we're having a conversation and there's somebody who might be 5 meters away and the room might be dead quiet, or there might be less background noise in the open office area, maybe because people are working 50% capacity in the office, which is happening a lot more now.
True.
You may be more likely to hear that conversation at a distance because there's less background noise. And you might unintentionally eavesdrop to a conversation that may meant to be private, or you get distracted because when humans hear speech, we try to decipher it. And that might stop you from being able to concentrate on your work. When you introduce or reintroduce a background noise to help make that speech distraction less intelligible, you're going to be able to provide a more productive atmosphere for your team. You may be able to concentrate better on the work at hand, and you're also protecting people's privacy and concerns about unintentionally hearing conversations or someone's conversation happening and they are worried about other people hearing it.
Oh, so very strong benefits there in the modern workplace. And as you say, especially now that I guess organizations are really trying to think about how they can make the environments a little bit more attractive for people to come to, and hybrid's not going away, but if we could somehow make the physical workspace better than what it used to be, I think that's positive for everyone. Well, look, I really want to thank you, Chris, for coming on the show today. It's an absolute pleasure to have you, mate. You've got a lot of wisdom and experience that you've shared with us today.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm glad we were able to sit down and have this chat. It's very productive, and I look forward to seeing what the future lies for these sort of things.
Absolutely. Jono, as always.
It's been a pleasure, boys.
Thanks, mate. Well, to wrap this up, I think what we really learned today is the hearing assistance we started talking about. There's definitely some items there which need to be thought about, and there's different options, different applications. Maybe what's lesser known is options for the vision impaired, and we've gone through some of those. Some general design best practices as well in terms of heights of panels, and very interesting finishing off there with sound masking and some lighting improvements that can make the environment better. So thanks again, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Tech Simple podcast. To like, share, or discover more episodes, head over to Spotify. If you'd like to talk to us about AV in your workplace or learning environment, book an initial discovery call with David or Jonathan at konnectus.com.au. And remember, Tech Simple!